morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I'm very excited today to kick things off with another giveaway from our friends at DolbyAtmos. Now, before we get to the giveaway specifically, and it's a really good one, SanAndreas, as you might recall from my review, I really like this film, so I'm glad that 3 of you will be getting a copy of it. But before we get into how you can win one of those 3 copies, I just want to take a moment to give you a snapshot of where Dolby is right now, because it's really a very interesting situation. Now, they didn't ask me to do this. They asked me just to give away the 3 copies. But since this is a show which focuses on the business side of Hollywood, I think that many of you would be interested in how Dolby is reshaping itself as a company that is recognized by the movie-going public, right? That isn't just a behind-the-scenes company, as it has been for so long, and really a leader when it comes to sound systems and sound mixing in the movie business. But anyway, as I said, they're trying to become more of a public brand. And, you know, you can trace this back to when they took over the Kodak Theater and renamed it the Dolby Theater, where the Oscars are held each year. But they've also acquired the San Francisco Tower in San Francisco, and that actually, I believe it just opened or is about to open, and that's really going to be, I think, a resource to the city of San Francisco, because not only are Dolby's offices there, but they have a number of facilities that, of course, you know, have to do with sound design and you know, the arts. So if you're in that area, I think it's, you know, worth at least checking out. So that's very interesting. Then, of course, they're also becoming more involved with, you know, the way movies are, you know, the way you listen to movies, right? So we've talked about this a little bit before, that DolbyAtmos is, you know, trying to have their own theaters, right, to compete with IMAX. So some of you actually, particularly I think overseas, have a DolbyAtmos theater near you, or soon will. And also, DolbyAtmos, the sound system, is being installed in more U.S. theaters. For instance, here in New York City, when I was recently at AMC Lincoln Square, they had a big sign, you know, a big display talking about Dolby Atmos sound technology and how it would make The Martian even more enjoyable. And then, of course, in addition to those sound systems within the theaters themselves, they're also continuing to mix some of the biggest blockbusters to hit theaters with Dolby Atmos sound technology. And that mix carries over to the Blu-ray release, which is why they're having me give away 3 Blu-ray copies to you. So that's kind of what's going on with Dolby right now. And it's always interesting to see a company kind of change its narrative and where it sits, you know, in the scope of things. So let's get to that giveaway. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that as interesting as I do. But anyway, so if you want one of these 3 copies of SanAndreas, you have to tweet me, and you have to also hashtag DolbyAtmos. Now, we're going to do a little something different this time. So, you know, again, I think this is a great movie. I really enjoyed it. It was one of the bigger hits of the summer, and it was such a big hit that it opened up a lot of doors for Dwayne Johnson and gave him a lot of really interesting opportunities. You know, for instance, Big Trouble in Little China, he has a deal to remake that, and also Disney not only has him as the voice, one of the voices in Moana, but he had that deal, I think, right around the time SanAndreas came out, but they've also just signed him for their Jungle Cruise movie. So SanAndreas was a big hit, and also a big hit for Dwayne Johnson specifically. So now you'll have an opportunity to see why, if you didn't see the movie. So this is what I would like you to do if you would like to win a copy of this, one of these 3 copies of the Blu-ray. So you have to tweet me at Grace Randolph, and you have to include the hashtag DolbyAtmos and the hashtag SanAndreas. And then I want you to tell me why you would want Dwayne Johnson to rescue you in an earthquake. All right. So again, it has to be at Grace Randolph and hashtag DolbyAtmos and hashtag SanAndreas. And then you have to tell me why you would want Dwayne Johnson to rescue you during an earthquake. And I will pick the 3 best answers to share here on Morning Movie News on Monday, and those will be the 3 people to win a copy of the Blu-ray, again, from our friends at DolbyAtmos. So good luck, and if I favorited your tweet, that means I've seen it and you're entered. Okay, so thank you everybody who participates in these. I think we always have a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing your tweets on this. All right, so let's get to today's 3 movie news stories, which are all, I think, very interesting. Now, the first one has to do with Marvel, which of course is, you know, really, you know, every time they set their sights on a director, they either turn them down or they go to another property. Of course, I'm talking about Ava DuVernay, their first choice for Black Panther, who they couldn't get on the same page with creatively, and she unfortunately was quite public about that. And then also F. Gary Gray, they were interested in him, but he went and took the Fast and Furious 8 gig, which I think nobody can blame him for, and I think was the right move at the time. Because that's a movie that's moving forward right now, whereas Black Panther is still in the scripting stage, and it's a little bit of a ways off. We'll see. It comes out the year after Fast and Furious 8. So anyway, who are they going to get? Well, now they've set their sights on Ryan Coogler, who directed Fruitvale Station, and the upcoming Creed. Now, this would be very interesting because it would have Ryan Coogler not working with Michael B. Jordan unless he could find a different role for him. Although I have to say, considering how Fantastic Four went down, if I were Marvel, I'd be like, nah, no disrespect to Michael B. Jordan, but I don't want him anywhere near my picture. I like Michael B. Jordan quite a bit. I hope that Creed course corrects his career post Fantastic Four, but still Marvel property, comic book property, and I'm sure Michael B. Jordan doesn't want to get involved in a comic book property for quite some time either. But it would be interesting to see Ryan Coogler step out on his own. I think he's a very talented director. I actually got to interview him, and he was a very nice person as well, very professional. I'll put a link to that review, actually, at the very end of this episode. But he did a wonderful job with Fruitvale Station. We'll see how Creed turns out. But I think he is a good choice. He's a very young director, a very new director, but he could become a really strong talent for Marvel. Marvel continues to work very hard to put together a behind-the-camera team, which, the screenwriter they've put on this from their own Disney writing program is also black, and they're going to have a black director, and they're going to have a black star, and this also now comes out during Black History Month. So Black Panther I think it has to have some authenticity to it, although I have to say, I've had a few of you point out to me that this is all African-American talent, and that considering the fact that Wakanda is a story that takes place on the continent of Africa, maybe it would be nice to go and find some filmmakers from that continent to speak about, to have that perspective and bring it to the table, which is a pretty good idea. Which also shows that when you start to play this kind of game of like, oh, well, I've matched the property to the same kind of, demographic as the lead character, well, sometimes you can never, there's always something you didn't do. You didn't go that extra step. So it's a dangerous game that Disney's playing. And they ran into a lot of problems with The Princess and the Frog because of that. They were like, oh, we're going to have a take place in New Orleans. And everyone was like, you're just pandering to us. So it was a difficult situation for them, and I'm curious to see how Black Panther turns out. It's a big gamble to put all your eggs in one basket, pretty much. But if it pays off, it'll be very big, not only for Disney Marvel, but also for, the black filmmaking community. Although I'm not sure, again, as I've said to you, how do you feel about this? Do you want Black Panther to be a black film, or do you want it to just be a superhero movie? And how is it going to distinguish itself in that regard? It's a very tricky question, but I think at the end of the day, I can't speak to the screenwriter because he doesn't really have any experience professionally, but Ryan Coogler, regardless of his skin color, is a very talented, extremely talented director, and I think he would do a great job. Although it is worth noting that to date, he's done two projects which are, very, have very strong racial overtones to them. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Black Panther. I'm probably as nervous as Kevin Feige is about it. So I'm curious, what do you think? How do you think of the way Black Panther's coming together? What do you think of Ryan Coogler? And do you think that he's as good a choice as Ava DuVernay and F. Gary Gray? I still think Ava DuVernay would have been the best choice because I think she's a very aggressive filmmaker. I think Ryan Coogler is a good filmmaker, but I just don't know. Ava DuVernay seems to be very good at publicizing things, so I'm not quite sure. We'll see. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is that Star Wars: The Force Awakens just got some new competition, and it's from Fox, of course, the former distributors of those stories from a galaxy far, far away. And they are actually going to go toe-to-toe with Star Wars: The Force Awakens with Alvin and the Chipmunks 3, The Road Chip. Now, you might be thinking, that's ridiculous. Why would Star Wars be worried at all about Alvin and the Chipmunks 3? And I think in large part, they shouldn't be too worried because I think that franchise has lost a considerable amount of momentum. But here's where things could get tricky. Of course, Star Wars is supposed to be kid-friendly. That's one of the reasons the prequels turned out the way they did, because they were, really geared towards kids. And as a result, a lot of kids who saw those movies actually liked them, even though they horrified many older Star Wars fans. But you have a situation where the new movie's going a little bit darker, a little more adult, and then in contrast, you now have some competition for the kids' market. So Will the family audience maybe go to see Alvin and the Chipmunks instead, especially because it's the holiday season? And also, it's going to be so crowded, maybe people will say, I don't want to have my kids have to deal with such a big crowd. I'm going to go and see Alvin and the Chipmunks instead, and I'll go see Star Wars at another time. We'll see. I'm not sure. I think, I've heard a rumor that there are some theaters that will play Star Wars on every screen, at least for a week, so that's going to be pretty fun and pretty cool. So I think Disney's definitely going to try and make it so that everyone can see Star Wars who wants to see Star Wars, and to be part of what's going to be a very big party. But I'm curious if this will, rain on that parade by having such a strong contender for the family audience. So I'm curious if you have very small kids, or if you know someone with very small kids, what do you think they would choose now that they have this choice? Would they go to see Star Wars The Force Awakens, or will they go see Alvin and the Chipmunks The Road Chip? And if you have a small child, or if you like to go to the movies with a small child, what are you going to say when that small child turns to you and says, "We're seeing Alvin and the Chipmunks The Road Chip, right? Not Star Wars." What are you going to say to that kid? Are you going to be like, "I'm sorry, I love you very much, but I just can't do it. I got to see Star Wars." Or will you just go see 2 movies in one day? All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is, again, The Hollywood Reporter has become very good at kind of uncovering like these not so great stories for the studios, right? And I wonder what it's doing to their relationship with the studios. But The Hollywood Reporter is such a big name when it comes to the industry trades that I think they're probably okay. But anyway, they decided a good perspective to have on Pan's recent flop, something that is probably, it turns out, analysts say they think that Pan will probably end up costing Warner Brothers $150 million. That's the loss they're going to have on that picture. So the Hollywood Reporter said, well, what about the other live-action fairy tale they're working on that's supposed to come up next, Tarzan, in 2016? How's that coming along? Because we haven't heard anything about it. And they uncovered a really bad situation. Now, let me tell you what the situation is, and then we can talk about how this is probably doomed from the beginning anyway. But this is very dangerous for Warner Brothers, because not only would it be another loss for them when it comes to live-action fairy tales, I believe Andy Serkis will deliver, though, with his Jungle Book. But, how much damage will Disney's Jungle Book have done by then in cornering the market? But anyway, Margot Robbie is, of course, the co-star in this, playing Jane, and Warner Brothers is working very hard to build her up as a star, one of their in-house talents. So it would behoove them not to kill her career themselves. But anyway, so there's a lot riding on this picture in that it's a live-action fairy tale for Warner Brothers. Margot Robbie co-stars in it, and they are very heavily invested in her. And then get this! For a movie that co-stars Margot Robbie, who, by the way, isn't proven yet as a box office draw, and then the lead is Alexander Skarsgård from True Blood, a show that hasn't been on the air for I think maybe 1 or 2 years now, they spent $180 million on it. Now, who on earth would okay a budget of that size for this picture? It's absolutely ridiculous. And I don't understand why Tarzan would cost $180 million, considering the cast. It also stars Samuel L. Jackson and Christoph Waltz. Nobody there warrants too big of a paycheck. So I don't understand how it even got to 180, and that just seems like a disaster from the get-go. But it's gotten worse. David Yates is directing the film, and he, of course, comes from the Harry Potter movies, and he's another director that Warner Brothers is trying to have be an in-house talent, right? They have Christopher Nolan, now they want to have David Yates. And, of course, they've asked him to come on board after directing so many Harry Potter movies to do the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them spin-off, which has just begun shooting. But here's the problem. Tarzan isn't done in post-production. So David Yates is not sitting in on post-production because he's in the middle of making a very important movie for Warner Brothers. So they kind of have a situation where Tarzan has been left behind, yet they're still trying to have it make its release date. But yet Tarzan, I think, because it's less publicized and doesn't have any huge stars in it, unfortunately, that could be pushed back. But Fantastic Beasts cannot. So I think it's very interesting. Also, Hollywood Reporter mentioned that Jerry Weintraub, the main producer on the film, tragically passed away over the summer, so it doesn't really have a strong hand in that regard either in charge of it. But I'm just really surprised that Warner Brothers, a major studio, would allow a problem like this to develop and would put themselves into the position where they could lose $180 million. And by the way, that doesn't even include what they're going to spend on advertising for the picture. So I'm curious, what do you think of this situation? Do you think Tarzan can be salvaged? And also, would you have spent $180 million on a picture starring Alexander Skarsgård and Margot Robbie? Write your thoughts down below. That's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. And please let me know what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have for the usual viewer question. And don't forget to enter for a chance to win one of those 3 Blu-ray copies of San Andreas by, again, tweeting me at Grace Randolph, hashtag DolbyAtmos, hashtag SanAndreas, why you would want Dwayne Johnson to save you when there is an earthquake. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.